You probably know that recently, GTA 6 showed off its first trailer. I'm not particularly that interested in that series. The only GTA game I'm really interested in trying out is San Andreas, but I'm gonna have to get the PS2 version sometime because that Switch remaster turned out to be dookie. But anyways, in this trailer it was announced that GTA 6 has a release window of 2025, completely missing next year, and a particular friend of mine that I won't name thought this was a bit ridiculous. And you know, I don't really agree, because you can't rush art. And that being said, the struggle that creatives have to face when trying to make their art the way they want it to be, or having to face it being done in a timely manner so it can be sold on store shelves, is particularly fascinating to me. A YouTuber I enjoy watching is called The Real Gyms. He makes a lot of Simpsons review content, and in his video on just what exactly the Simpsons Golden Age is, he brings up a quote that's rattled around in my head ever since I first watched this video. The quote was by Brent Forrester for the episode Sideshow Bob's Last Gleaming. To summarize what stuck out to me in this quote was, "This is my life. My life is grains of sand in the hourglass to arrive at Colonel Happablap." And we were all kind of just laughing at the waste of our lives, I think. And you know what? This quote really struck me because they are right. Time is indeed a very valuable, albeit finite thing. But I think one of the most valuable aspects of it is that with our time, we can create and give to others something that they can appreciate. In other words, the way different pieces of art are affected by the amount of time that is allowed to be put into them is really interesting and worth analysis. And as you can probably expect, I'm going to start this analysis by discussing Mother 3. Mother 3 went through some crazy development hell, and took about 12 years to release after initially being thought up. We know how the N64 version had to be cancelled due to the upcoming GameCube needing the resources. I don't want to focus on that today. What I think needs some spotlight is this fascinating tidbit that I've discussed in another video, but I feel like there's more to be said about it. This is an internal Nintendo content review schedule from March 2005, stating that Mother 3 for GBA was scheduled for the aforementioned content review, and a note of a tentative release date of October 2005, and a possible delay. Mother 3 didn't end up releasing until 6 months after this projected time frame, on the 20th of April 2006, so the delay went from a possibility to reality. What fascinates me is this gives us a huge insight as to the final period of development for the GBA version, something that is still rather spotty information-wise. I think something that some people forget is that even though Mother 3 is a beautiful piece of art, this content review schedule reminds us that Mother 3 is ultimately the same as any Nintendo game. It was made to sell copies to make money, and with Mother 3 indeed being a product available at stores, it does raise the question, how much of the game was left to be completed at the time of this schedule? Content review means evaluating the contents of the game to see what needed to be finished still to meet the projected release window. The Game Boy Advance was on its way out by the time Mother 3 was nearing completion, and at this point, the GBA version of the game was approaching 4 years of development time. Was Mother 3 compromised in some way to meet a deadline? That is something I wonder often, and I'm sure will be something to be discussed for years to come with this game's development history. With the knowledge that there is a huge plethora of unused content left in the files, it is possible that some portion of it was cut not for reasons having to do with it not fitting in with the game, story/gameplay/presentation wise, but rather due to time constraints, forcing not completely necessary additions to be axed. And I find that possibility to be interesting. That being said, I'd like to bring on my next point of discussion. What is a game that many would say is in a similar genre to Mother 3, but has completely unequivocally different development circumstances? Deltarune. Deltarune is a game I'm mildly interested in, but for this video's sake, I want to spotlight the development process of it. Deltarune was an idea for a game heavily hinted to have existed for years prior to 2015, which is a significant year as that was when Deltarune's creator, Toby Fox, released his first proper game, that being this little project called Undertale. I imagine if you're watching this, you're absolutely aware of Undertale's runaway success, and I bring that up with the knowledge that not only does Toby have all the money he'd possibly need to make a new game to his liking, but he has no corporate overhead and obligations to have to put out a game by a certain date, and that's so interesting to me. He has all the time and money he could ever need to make his video game exactly the way he wants it to be. Toby is someone who's proven he's willing to put his all into making his art, from working despite chronic wrist pain to releasing the second chapter of Deltarune for free due to world events at the time. And that brings me to my point about the partial method of release Deltarune has been following. Unlike a typical RPG, each chapter of Deltarune has released chapter by chapter currently, with chapters 3 and 4 heavily hinted at a release sometime next year. This method of release is also pretty interesting, as it means fans of the series get new content at least every few years, rather than having to wait for one entire game that would be completed at some unknown, faraway date. Toby Fox is extremely lucky to essentially have the most ideal conditions for being able to develop his game. How many other examples can you think of developers having no deadline and more or less a limitless budget? Well, Super Mario Bros. Wonder is one example. That game is great. Not all developers are as lucky as Toby Fox, unfortunately. Some developers really need to fight to get their projects an appropriate amount of dev time to make a finished product. Sonic Frontiers is a recent example of interest to me. The game's producer, Takashi Iizuka, has gone on to say that he essentially begged Sega to delay the game by a year for more development time. Sega wanted the game out by holiday season 2021, and personal feelings on Sonic Frontiers aside, the game is mostly functional and has a level of polish that is at the very least acceptable for a game that cost me $75. Could you imagine how much worse this game could have been had they not had this delay? Ultimately, having enough time to make a game is important to having the end product be something of quality, but it isn't exclusively a battle of only having to meet a corporate deadline. It is also just a personal time factor. Games more often than not take many years to make. Not everyone wants to make that commitment of spending so long to make a piece of media, and not wanting to spend huge chunks of your life working on something and needing to get a product done by a certain time frame do go hand in hand. But at the end of the day, think about the pieces of media that may stick with you for a long time after having experienced them, like Mother 3, or GTA, or The Simpsons. The people behind these products put their all into making something enjoyable, put so much time and effort, whether it be spending over a decade working on this one project, or spending sleepless nights trying to get their writing to be the very best it could be. And I admire that immensely. Is art worth suffering for to make? That's a question many artists ask themselves and others. I think if you're truly satisfied with what you've made, then I think the struggle is worth it in the end. And even if you have to compromise your vision because of a deadline, it's okay. Corporate deadlines do suck, but one day, if you truly have a vision for something you find great that you want to make more than anything, you'll be able to make your dream game or movie or anything. Just never quit when the going gets tough. Being a creative in this field where you're expected to keep up with literally everyone else isn't easy, and I can't imagine it's fun to pour so much money and resources into something only for it to not even break even. But if just one person can feel like they felt joy from what you were able to make, I think it was worth it in the end, even if you had to make some compromises to get there. Take it from me, some dude with a tiny YouTube channel who'll go on and on about his special interest video games until the cows come home. In conclusion, just be transparent when you can too. If you're taking a long time to make something, it'll save you a lot of headaches in the end.